exciting program. So welcome to Holiday Traditions Through Time. I'm Christine Reeder, Adult Services Librarian, Pasadena Public Library, and I want to tell you just a few things about the library. While our doors are closed, you can do contactless curbside pickup at all of our branches except Hill and Villa Park. You can find information about the library on the Pasadena Public Library website. We have chat capabilities with you, and you can use all of our resources 24/7. We have lots and lots of programs. They're in our monthly off the shelf. If you go to our webpage, you can go under news and notices, and that's how you all found out about today, I know, but we have lots of other programs each month, and I hope you will consider joining some of those as well. So thank you so much for joining us today. But I'm very excited to be able to introduce you to Diana Mathur. So Diane, would you raise your hand? There's Diane. Janet Wertman. Janet. Jeri Westerson. And our moderator and reviewer, Erin Davies. So it's going to be a fact-filled and a spirited look at holiday traditions through time. Diana Mathur is the author of The Ghastly Year. She will cover traditions from the Balkans. Janet Wertman, Tudor expert and author of the 3-book Seymour Saga, will cover merry old England. Jeri Westerson, author of The Crispin Guest, Medieval Noir Mysteries, and The Enchanted Chronicles, will cover medieval and Victorian traditions. So all of these ladies are members of the Southern California Chapter Historical Novel Society. It's a non-profit international literary society devoted to the promotion of and advocacy for the genre of historical fiction. So I know we're in for a very exciting afternoon. We all really want to get into that holiday spirit. And maybe some of you heard before, but we have an attendee that's all the way here from Pennsylvania. And it's looking like Christmas there, for the holidays, of course, with all the snow. So welcome to everyone. And now I'm going to turn it over to Erin to start the discussion amongst our 4 presenters. Ladies.
Hey, thank you, and thank you for having us. Well, we've got intros out of the way, so let's just jump on in. And before we get into what traditions and what holidays, I want to ask our panelists, what do holiday traditions bring to historical fiction, and why are these moments important to keep in your stories? Who would like to go first? Diana, go ahead.
Okay. Holidays, I love to write holidays in my stories because they are a fusion of all the arts. Holidays have song and dance unique to them, food unique to them, and stories unique to them. Holidays are one time during the year you can usually get away with doing something special. Like tonight I'm going to talk about mumming, which happens once a year. And they're an explosion of sensations and imagery, which is great for the writer. Also, holidays usually commemorate something that happened in history. And so they're a natural way to weave that information into the story and to mark the passage of time. Like in my story set in Latvia, all my events tend to happen around solstices and equinoxes, which are significant culturally to Latvia. And I have one other reason why I like to write about holidays, and it's because my story is set during a war. It's a war-torn country. And I like to balance the carnage and gore of war with the beauty and happiness of holidays and cultural traditions. War and culture are opposites. War destroys culture, and when people are not having to fight or having to defend themselves, They can be planning weddings and raising babies, and by focusing on all the great and rich traditions of a place, it shows what's at stake when there's a war and what the cost is.
Janet, do you want to go next?
Sure. I think that the holidays and festivities, they really give you a feel of the time period. In the medieval time period, the religious holidays, festivals, holy days inform everything that all the characters, all the people do. I mean, you are regulated even by the hours, because there's the divine office that's being rung on the bells throughout a city or the village if you have a little monastery nearby. So it's all about informing the characters and how they think and feel about themselves and their place in society, because these are very stratified societies in that time period, and each person has a role to play. So we'll talk about all that good stuff.
I'm going to riff off of what Jeri said, because I completely agree with that. But what they also do is they ground us, they allow us to ground the reader in who we are now. Because a lot of these traditions are just, or at the very least, resonant with us of what we do ourselves, and therefore it is an easier bridge for the reader to really understand when we put them in that other world, because they have that little bit. So yeah,
As a reader, I totally agree with all three of you, so well done. Okay, all of you write different eras. What tradition or what holidays are your characters celebrating? Let's go with Jeri.
Well, in the Middle Ages, they are celebrating every Catholic holiday, every saint's day, every feast day, everything you can think of. So they are doing that. Some are more important than others. If you're named after a particular saint, that's an important feast day for you. And of course, Easter was the most important holiday on the calendar. Christmas wasn't as big a holiday as it was later, but it was part of their life. Like I said, you hear the bells at the certain hours of the divine office to be. This is what monastics, monks, and nuns throughout the day, certain times of the day, bells would be rung, and they would drop all of their work and go into the church and pray the specific prayers for that time of day. And they would do that from midnight all the way through the end of the day. And they would rise even at night to do that. So that informed everything that the characters do and how they think of themselves. Of course, we can go to the Victorian era, where Christmas was now the biggest holiday. And the Victorians pretty much invented Christmas as we know it. So I'm sure that's probably for a different question, but yeah, it's for these characters now. The Jewish characters in the medieval period have a different experience, of course, from their Christian brethren there. I write primarily about England. So in 1290, all the Jews of England were kicked out. They had to go. But however, through a lot of research, I found that there were many converts, of course, but there were others who simply just stayed and pretended they were Christian. But they secretly celebrated their traditions as well. So Hanukkah would have been one of those very important holidays. Even though Hanukkah is not very important in the Jewish calendar, it particularly resonated with Jews of this time period because it's about small groups of people being invaded by larger groups of people. For instance, the Hanukkah celebration is about the temple being desecrated by these invaders and cleaning it up, and the miracle of the oil that burned for 8 days instead of one, so they could clean it up and have their celebrations. So it was very important to Jews of the medieval period. I'm gonna end it on that note.
I'm gonna piggyback. Oh, Jerry, I'm just gonna piggyback you all night long. Because we're not that far
Medieval
off.
just slides into the Tudor period.
Exactly. So in addition to, just because there was a really cool thing that started to happen in the Tudor era, because Henry VIII had a thing for musicians and music, and there is nothing that he wanted to do more than have music played, and his musicians were more and more Jewish. By 1547, which is when he died, 19 of his 35 or so musicians were Jewish. He brought in a black trumpeter back in, actually his father brought in the trumpeter in 1507. It is, that guy was the only example of an African person whose portrait was painted during all the way up to, I forget when, because there was like this huge tournament to celebrate the birth of a son of Henry's who then later died. And so he was portrayed on the roll. But so the musicians might have been able to celebrate Hanukkah a little bit more obviously, but I agree they would not have done it very, very loudly at court at all. But they started to come back there from
So you like klezmer music? That's it.
right. Exactly.
Just kidding, everyone.
Diana?
Well, I'm in a different part of the world, and I would like to mention that I noticed that Leonarda Kestiers has rang into the audience from Riga, Latvia. And Leonarda is with the Ministry of Culture. Her career has been with the Ministry of Culture in Riga. And I'm really honored that she came to join us tonight. And welcome to Pasadena, California, and Pasadena Public Library, Leonarda. And I see a lot of other people from different Latvian festivals that I've met, and I know that you know a lot more about this subject than I do. And so feel free to use the chat box or to add your 2 cents at the end. But I'll just like to show you, first of all, where Latvia is, so we get that straight. And then it explains a lot about the customs. The geography place sure can explain, of a place tells you, explains a lot. Latvia is a small country. It's one of the Baltics, there on the Baltic Sea, between Lithuania and Estonia, and across the water from Finland. And it's a country that has a beautiful port, lots of rivers, excellent farmland, and mainly forest. The last pagans of Europe lived in Latvia. And those pre-Christian traditions really influence today's holidays, which mainly fall around the solstices and equinoxes and honor nature. And you can see that Latvia is surrounded by some big neighbors. Russia, which at the time was the USSR. Germany is not on the map here, but they're not far away. Poland and Sweden. And at different times in Latvia's history, it has been occupied by all of those countries. And Latvia was, the Latvians there were in the medieval ages, like they were serfs. Serfs are, they work the land, they're yoked to the land, they are part of the land. And so Latvians really understand their land. And today, I think it's still part of the local Latvian soul to be very in tune with nature. And so this respect for nature and the pre-Christian traditions intertwine. And when the New World Order came in, the establishment of the churches, the old world order didn't just disappear, but there are some layers that that are evident. And, you know, one that I've just come to appreciate this season is what I have always called a Christmas tree. And in Latvia, the tree has been honored for a long time by the pagans. And I'm just going to go ahead and show you some pictures I have, because my story, whoops, I can't screen share, but that's okay. I'll just tell you about it. In my story, based on true events in Latvia, a big part of the population was deported to Siberia, and on the night of June 14th, 1941. And I always wanted to go see Siberia and what was left of the Gulag archipelago. So anyway, I took a trip up there on the Trans-Siberian Railroad a few years ago and went to Baikal, which provides 20% of Earth's water. But the point is that people up there today are still honoring trees by putting beautiful strips of silk around trees, and they're giant wooden stakes and just magnificent sacred sites that today's pagans still observe. And anyway, back to the pagans of Latvia, they would bring in an evergreen on the winter solstice as an example of how to survive the winter with style and grace and beauty, because evergreens, they go into a dormant state and they live off their pine needles. And if you're in a northern forest in medieval Latvia surviving the winter, that's an awesome example, the evergreen tree.
That's really cool. I hadn't actually heard that before. You kind of covered my next question a little bit, so I'm just going to kind of lead into that with the other two. With Latvia, you seem to have a lot of outdoor, nature-based celebratory traditions. What's going on in England, guys? What kind of celebrations are these? Where are they celebrating? What do they feel like? Are they big events? Are they home-based? What are they?
Well, since Diana mentioned trees, one of the things, the wassailing was one of the things that they did on Twelfth Night, which is our version, which is kind of morphed into Christmas caroling today. But in the south of England, picking up on the pagan traditions themselves, wassailing would be done by a group of people getting drunk and then going out to the apple trees to sing to the trees. So,
okay.
Yeah.
I've always been awful.
Right, exactly.
Doesn't singing help plants anyway? Science.
Well, it's supposed to protect them from evil spirits, so they'll.
There you go. It's a holiday tradition that we do all year.
That's right. Getting drunk under a tree is a tradition. Well, you know, I mean, this brings it up, the idea that it's not just Christmas. We could be talking about. There's all these other traditions as well, and Pentecost, Whitsun, or White Sunday, in the Forest of Dean, they throw bread and cheese at you from the church roof, and now they do it from the church wall, so that's all right. And they didn't do it to scare you off. They did it as it's sort of an offering, because this it's sort of, the Lammas is in August 1st, so that's a harvest holiday. You're supposed to make the first loaf from the first wheat that you picked, that you've threshed, and that's that you bring to church to be blessed. But the loaf tossing is a little later. Obviously, it's earlier. Excuse me, Pentecost. And these are based on, a lot of these traditions, actually these weird ones, are based on pacing or walking the boundaries of a parish. You have to remind everybody every year what the boundaries are, because you want to be paying taxes once to the Lord that you're living, the land you're living on, not to both guys who've got a border right between. So everybody they had to walk sort of the boundaries. But this is one of those things. The legend is that King John, he said he gave it was said that he bestowed certain rights to about 1,000 acres to this village for the grazing land. So I guess it was the at the time it was the Count of Hereford at that time and the Hunnels, and he basically said, no, I don't want these people to graze on my land. I want them to gather wood and do things. I don't want them there at all. But his wife, the countess, said, well, if I ride around the perimeter of the land on a horse naked, she stole it from Lady Godiva, obviously, then will you let them take the sticks and fuel and things like that? And he says, sure, go for it. So she did, and it had to be granted. And so this is a big celebration. Just throw some loaves and cheese at people when you really want to celebrate.
That also makes me feel a lot better about eating Godiva chocolate at
There you
holidays.
go.
I'm just saying.
It's a fine old tradition, apparently.
Right. So I know this is going to sound a little bit like Joan Rivers, but my family wears PJs throughout Christmas Day. It's a tradition in this household. We're weird. But what are your characters wearing? What's going on during the periods that you write? Are there traditional clothing? Are they dressing up at all for the holidays? Let's go with Janet.
They're definitely dressing up. There are certain people. So one of the things that the Tudors really like to do, and they liked role reversals. And they did this actually twice during the year. There were 3 holidays that gave a primarily agrarian society a week-long vacation along with them, and that was Yuletide, which was Christmas, Eastertide, and then Whitsuntide, which was like June. And one of the things that they did, and 2 of these, not at Easter because that was a little bit more serious, but what they would do is they would have a pie in which a bean or something would be baked, and whoever got the bean would be the Lord. At Yuletide, it was the Lord of Misrule, and he would essentially be the king for the day. Or for the night, and then a woman, there was a different thing for a woman so that she could be the lady, but they did that on both those occasions so that somebody at random would be picked to suddenly be in a position of power, and that was an important way of blowing off steam by then. And there was good-natured fun going on with all of that. There was a religious version, the boy bishop, where they picked an altar boy from among the church officials, and he did absolutely everything except for actually saying mass, but he would do the sermons. Yes, and many of them apparently went on to big careers in the church after that.
Suddenly feel a lot better about my son interrupting dinner. Diana, what are your characters wearing? Are they dressing up at all for the holidays?
They are, Erin, especially on winter solstice. They could be mumming, which reminds me a lot of the wassailing Janet described, but the mumming season, I think it also, depending on the region, could be called Keketas or Budei. And it goes from November through February, and they are dressing up as animals or disguising themselves as a haystack or a very tall woman or a long-necked stork or a gypsy, and they're going from house to house and reciting poetry and singing songs and warding off evil spirits as they go. And then they're being greeted by people and given feasts and gifts when they get there for their service. So it may be a precursor to caroling. And they're also fortune telling on that night through a variety of small rituals, seeing designs in heavy cream, or standing with their backside to a fire and bending down and looking through your legs and seeing the face of the person you're going to marry in the flames, or any manner of techniques we all might borrow from.
Very cool.
I think it's a good reminder that everybody usually drank a lot in those days, so not drinking a lot of water. My characters, only the wealthy would really be doing the dressing up, and there was a good merchant class at that time in the 14th century. It's a large class of people who were middle class to upper middle class people who would dress well, and these were the people who would become the London mayors and the elected as sheriffs. So they could dress up, but the ordinary folks, the people who were working for these merchants, apprenticing with these merchants, they didn't have much change of clothing. So, keep yourself clean, I guess, but you wouldn't be dressing up a whole lot.
I love that you mentioned that. I think we sometimes forget that socioeconomics plays a role in how you celebrate. And I think that's one of the benefits of historic fiction, because you're able to catalog all of those and put them all together, and it doesn't feel one-sided. It feels like you're world building and you're trying to convey something that's bigger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's really awesome. So my next question, because I'm a foodie, what are your characters eating during the holidays? And this is an important question because I will probably want to try and rip something off later and make it myself.
Not mine.
You sure? I'm an adventurous eater, Janet.
Okay, I will bet you on this one.
Ooh,
The Tudor pie was the traditional thing, and I wrote this down because I've got to get the order correct. It was a pigeon baked inside a partridge, inside a chicken, inside a goose, inside a turkey, and that whole mishmash was put into a pastry case that they called a coffin and served surrounded by hare and other game birds.
A turducken suddenly sounds very simple.
Yes, it does.
Now, does that give you any desire to try it at home?
A little bit. I think I can only have like one bite though.
Right.
But the turkey is interesting because a turkey is a New World bird, and it was all the fashion in the Tudor period to get yourself a turkey. So these turkeys were very expensive. It's the cheapest meat we get now for Thanksgiving, right? But it's very expensive in those days.
I write about the Tudor court. Let's get real.
Yeah. So the medieval table, if you were very wealthy, you'd have a boar's head for Christmas. And that's fancy. One of these days I've got to do that. This Jew who also has a Gentile husband, but a boar's head it's pretty big, really, and it's the whole head. And there it is, cooked to perfection. And that was, I want a cheek, I want a snout. So, all the kids arguing over it. But again, wealthy tables, and the not so wealthy tables would have a goose. So that's turned the tables now, because if you've ever shopped for a goose, those things are darned expensive. So now it's all backwards, right? Turkey's cheap, goose is expensive. It all depends on when you lived.
What about you, Diana? What are your characters eating?
Well, to this day, the entire head of a pig would be served. It's not served in every house, but it's depicted in almost every Christmas dinner that you'd look up, and a Latvian 9 or 12 dish Christmas dinner. And I've also seen them served at street fairs in Riga. So that's still a current thing. The whole head of a pig with the snout and the apple in the mouth. It's a very old dish, like Jeri said, going back to medieval times, but it's still popular. But at a traditional, Christmas in Latvia is 3 whole days off from Christmas Eve through the 26th. And Christmas is usually celebrated on Christmas Eve with the roast pork and the sauerkraut and the potatoes and this creamy mushroom sauce with dill on it. And a couple of the dishes are symbolic. The gray peas, marrow-fat peas, which are left to dry in the field, and then they're cooked up with bacon, and they're really delicious. And if you eat every one of them, then you won't be crying in the new year. And generally a large carp is served also. And when you're done eating the carp, you want to get some of those fish scales off and just tuck them in your pocket for prosperity in the coming year.
Carp
And-
for everyone.
Yeah.
It's important this time.
I've got to mention these beautiful pefferikukas, gingerbreads. You know, they're an art form among.
Did you make those?
Kailani Mathur made these.
Oh, they're beautiful.
They're gorgeous. Yeah, thank you, and they're characteristic.
It's interesting that your big feast, that the Latvian big feast was on Christmas Eve. In the Tudor era, Christmas was preceded by the whole Advent thing, where there was a lot of fasting, and Christmas Eve was the strictest fast of all. No meat, no cheese, no eggs. It was as if you wanted to like constrict it as much as possible for the big, huge feast that would the boar's head would come up the next day. So
Yeah, I think we forget that in these countries where Catholicism reigned, was that Advent is a penitential season. And for those of you who are Catholic, it is still a penitential season. But to people at large these days, Advent is a big run up to Christmas, and first December 1st, the lights go up and everything happens in your house. Different.
Right. Advent was much more like Lent was in terms of that parallel.
So, to spring this one on you guys, where are you guys getting all this information? Where are you researching holidays?
We're making it up.
You're making it, okay, it's all fantasy. I got it.
No, it comes out of all of the mounds of research that we all do. I mean, I have textbooks and copied things from archives and the manuscripts of the day. They talk about the things that they did and the lists, the shopping list, that's all the food that's listed and how much it cost and from family diaries and journals and things like that. So, it gets accumulated like that. And so, the farther back you go, it's those kinds of things, archives you have to find out. As you come up to Victorian eras, it's much easier to see what people had. I mean, they made etchings of families and their Christmas array and things like that. So you saw evidence of that. I mean, in illuminated manuscripts, you also saw that as well. There's a wonderful painting, a mural on a wall in an Italian castle that shows basically the earliest snowball fight. I mean, we think of that as, we don't even think about that as something somebody would remark down, but these are adults in their full medieval array, and they're having a snowball fight, like you do.
Some things are always constant, huh?
Yes, yeah.
My favorite source for, and it's on a topic we haven't even gotten to, is gift giving was a constant at the Tudor court to try to maintain relationships, but at Christmas time, it was, which happened on January 1st, it was ritualized with the monarch, and everybody gave Henry VIII, or whoever the king was, a present, and he gave everyone back. And so his presence, everyone used that opportunity to try to be like all creative. And 3 of those gift rolls from the reign of Henry VIII had survived, and a couple more from a little bit later. But we get to see, and 2 of the years, so Henry VIII left his first wife of 20 years because he needed a male heir. He fell in love, Anne Boleyn. Before he married Anne Boleyn, we have the gift roll that shows that he gave her 9 diamonds for her hair and a ruby brooch and everything else. And then we have the gift roll from after they were married, and he gave her serving forks and platters.
It's always the vacuum cleaner you get once you're married,
Again, some things just don't change. What about you, Diana?
Well, I'm on World War II Latvia, so I'm fortunate to have people who are alive. And I married into a Latvian family, and my mother-in-law, Beruta, was just telling me about declamations today, how she remembered, you don't just get your gift as a child in Latvia, you have to earn it. You have to recite a poem or a song, or in her case, she remembers Uncle Carl playing the violin. And so it's wonderful source of information. And then there's the Latvian community centers in this country. They are expats. They're people who they or their family, their parents fled the country during the war, and they're very intent on keeping the traditions and the cultures alive at their community centers, not to mention the song and dance festivals. So there are great vortexes of culture around here, and people who are willing to help me.
That is awesome.
I
love that there's like an oral tradition and a familial aspect to your stories. That's great.
Yeah, well, thank you. And it's really helpful since I don't speak Latvian, and so much of the good information is in the original language. So everybody's helped me.
Jeri and Janet are jealous. I can tell they're turning a little bit green.
Well, actually, my mother's side of the family is from Riga, so
Okay.
we have the blood.
Loti Lubby.
Love that. I thought you were going to say that we have reenactment groups that we can we can see the dances and the food. People can get pretty serious about
That can be a little dicey depending on who you're watching.
That's very true.
If somebody were interested in seeing the holidays in your books, could they find the holidays anywhere? Have you written a holiday?
I have just an instance in the third book, The Demon's Parchment, where it's happening at Christmas, but my character is a disgraced knight, kicked out of court, and living on the cheaper places in London. So he is basically punishing himself, and he doesn't celebrate Christmas, and even with his friends that he's accumulated on the Shambles, the Butcher's District, and he doesn't. So that's really the only mention. So he doesn't. He gets better. We're almost done with a series of 15 books. So he gets a little better. He's a little grouchy at the beginning.
I was going to say, he's a little bit of a Scrooge there.
Yeah.
Keeping himself away from it all.
Yeah, holidays don't really play a big role. I can't think of any. I don't think the books.
I think there's something to be said for somebody who's keeping himself away from it as punishment. That's indicative of somebody who values what the holidays mean to the community. So that's really kind of a cool comment on society and where his mental state is.
Him, yes.
Yeah. What about you, Janet? Have you written a holiday?
I stuck the whole gift roll procedure into Jane the Queen. Because it was the perfect opportunity to show Henry like not really caring, and well, oh, I can give this, and so I had fun with that. In the Path to Somerset, I had Edward Seymour looking at the decorations through his young nephew's eyes, so I had that opportunity, and then I really didn't have a chance to shoehorn it in to the Boy King. You know, it's got to be, the details have to be in service to the story. And so when they are, it is just wonderful.
Yes,
what
because
about you,
you can accumulate a whole binder full of research, but maybe you use one word of that.
Well, that's why we have panels.
That's right. So we can vomit it forth. Yes.
Exactly. Pre-planning. It's wonderful. Diana, what about you? Have you written a holiday?
I'm loaded with holidays. I organize my books, the scenes around the solstices and the equinoxes, and I've had my partisans dress up as mummers in order to, draw out the NKVD in an ambush. And I've had I haven't even mentioned Midsummer yet. Midsummer is the big Latvian holiday, even above Christmas. And, yeah, holidays all over, including names days, which it would be honored rather than your birthday. Latvia celebrates names days. So everybody named Jeri celebrates on one day, although I don't think Jeri is a traditional Latvian name, but all the Annas, all the Berutas, they all celebrate on one day. And yeah, it's a great way to explain the place. So loaded with holidays and traditions.
All right. So this is kind of a creative question. If you think of one of your characters and you think of a holiday that they would celebrate, what would you give them as a gift? We've covered a little bit that gift giving was a pretty regular thing across most holidays. What would you give your characters? Jeri, you want to go first?
He needs peace of mind. The intangibles. I mean, he earlier on he needed food, but he's doing pretty okay now. Yeah, he received a gift from John of Gaunt's son, the Henry of Bolingbroke, who became Henry IV. And because his sword was taken, his knighthood was taken away, his lands were taken, he was a baron. And he really lacked the sword. It's very Freudian. He was without a sword. And Henry gifted him one about the middle of the series, and that was very important to him, and it really helped him to understand himself better. You know, he was not just the suffering soul anymore. He really was valuable as a detective on the streets of London and fighting crime. So it meant a lot to him for that sword to come back into his possession.
Hello, Diane. I'm signed in. Can you hear me?
Hey, Ivars, yes.
How are you?
Good. Thanks for coming.
You're welcome. You're welcome. No, I just want to mention something about the Names Day. Names Day is more popular than your birthday, because at Names Day, it's basically the person whose name, is on that day. It's like an open house, and anybody can come in there and celebrate and say hello. Well, birthdays are usually centered about the friends and the family. So that's why it's the Names Day is more popular, especially in Latvia. We don't celebrate that much here in the United States, but in Latvia, that's a very, very, very common holiday, and basically, you can have 100 people walk in your house at any given time.
Thank you so much for mentioning that. And I love that holiday. It's one I'd love to institute over here.
Yes.
And
well, we have the calendars, and all the calendars, Latvian calendars, have all the names, and you're associated with one day, and your name's on that calendar for that particular day.
That's right.
So everybody should get a Latvian calendar.
There we go. Everyone, you know what you're getting for Christmas or whatever holiday you're celebrating.
Right.
Diana, what gift would you give your character if you could?
Well, I'm guessing a bicycle would have been really useful. It would have been a really high-end gift in 1940 Latvia to have a bicycle.
Yes.
I was shown family pictures where some kids had bicycles for Christmas or just in general, and it was pretty outlandish for a child to be given a bike, because that could be a major source of transportation. There were maybe only a couple hundred cars in Latvia, even during World War II. It was still a lot of horses there. So I think he would have been pretty happy with the bike.
What about you, Janet?
Antibiotics. I had two characters. My first and my third book, my main character could have been saved with a timely Z-Pack. So that would have been the ultimate present.
Yeah. That put things in perspective.
I did not expect that.
I know. I had gift giving in the books, like, a hawk was an amazingly wonderful present, but nah, they would have gone for
They're so hard to wrap, though.
that.
That is awesome. We've got just about 10 minutes left, so I think I want to open it up to questions. If anyone has any, I'm not sure who's manning the chat, but I want to thank all of our panelists for answering all my questions. And I'm letting the rest of the call loose on you, so have at it, guys.
Thank you. Erin, I have something to share also, another Latvian tradition that occurs on winter solstice that I think might be appropriate and helpful to people this year. And I know that you have it in Tudor and medieval London as well. And it's a Yule Log. This is my version of a Yule Log here. What you do is you go out and you get the biggest log you can manage, and you drag it on winter solstice around. I've got my rope here. You drag it around the property, around the farm, around the village. It can be a group thing. And you're going to collect all of the failures and heartache and all of the bad energy of the last year. So, my Yule Log, it has coronavirus and a few other, nasty things that we've had to endure this last year. And then you throw it in the bonfire.
Yep.
And you purge yourself, you burn it, you get rid of it, and you start the new year with a clean slate.
And you have to drag it opposite to the way the sun goes. It's very important that the direction is right. You shouldn't do the sun direction.
Okay, so if the sun sets in the
No, yeah, the sun goes like it's like goes like that, but you have to do the opposite way.
Okay, because it's all about the sun. The sun, winter solstice, which is next Monday night at 2 a.m. Pacific time. That's the shortest day of the year. And then, it's all about the sun coming back after that.
21st of December.
Okay, right. Next Monday.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
I do have a question in the chat. What do all of you like most about your characters?
I like how much he's grown. I mean, when you have a long series, it's the longest novel ever. Your character really has a chance to change, to grow, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. But you have a chance to have different experiences for the character that help him to understand the world that he's living in and his position in it, and to take heart at certain things. It's a lot of fun to really give your characters that breathing room. It's nice to have a long series. I'm going to be writing another long series again, but I did it, and now I don't have to do that again. They'll be 3 or to 6 books long. But it's nice to really get that chance to give your character, start with a very interesting backstory that creates the person in the first place, and then he's seasoned by all the things that happen. So.
What about you, Janet?
My characters, very different people, but they all mean well. And they are sincere and a little bit tortured in some cases, because but they mean well, and for the most part they do really good things until they can't or don't or whatever. So I like that about them.
I'm going to come back to you in a second, Diana. I've read books by all 3 of these authors, and they're all wonderful, but I want to just mention that I know when you think of Henry VIII as being well-meaning, that's not something that's very indicative of his general characterization. It works in Janet's books. Please read them and find out what she's talking about.
And I meant my main characters.
Henry and Jane the Queen is very sympathetic.
Yes, but he doesn't have a voice. So it's
maybe that's why he's sympathetic.
I triangulated Henry. I had Jane who thought he was all good and Cromwell who thought he was all evil. And so the reader gets to decide what they really think of him. So
Strength of the books. Dana, what about you? What do you like about your characters?
Well, my main character is, is based on somebody I knew, Carlos Smilton's our uncle. And I'm not answering the question so much directly, but what means so much to me is his artwork, that I've been able to use for our covers. He painted most of this stuff during the war, and when he was fighting as a Latvian legionnaire. And the writing is just always trying to match the painting. It's, it's so authentic. This one is called Witch Hammer, obviously. And I look at his things, he painted that. I'm wondering what's going on in his head, in my character's head when he painted this, when he was about 18 years old and drafted into the Latvian Legion and on the Eastern Front. So.
As a reader, I love your covers. I think they're really unique and they bring something special to the story. So that translates.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We do have another question. Would your characters recognize Midsummer, and how would they have recognized it? So, anyone? Bueller?
Midsummer is the main holiday in Latvia. And, I have not actually been to a Latvian Midsummer celebration. I know my husband has been over at your property, Leonarda, and it's a great party, and it's bonfires and dancing and singing, and the headdresses, the oak headdresses, and the girls in the flower headdresses. And I guess it's all based on an old fertility rite. Leonarda, I've seen a picture of you throwing bee pollen into a bonfire, and that just piques my imagination. It all seems so mysterious and wonderful.
The young people after midnight, they go into the forest and they look for this flower that only blooms during that night. So if they find that means that they're going to be a couple, get married, and so it's one of the traditions. Another tradition where we have a bonfire, but we put it on a, how do you say it? How would I say mutza in English? It's like a barrel, and then you put it on a big pole, and you heist it up so that all the neighbors could see that there's what we call the Midsummer Festival is called Ligua, Ligo, and everybody can see it. A lot of them come and celebrate with you, and you have a bonfire also on the ground, and everybody dances around that, and also the young people jump over it.
Very cool.
We've had the Midsummer, the Midsummer Festival. We've had it here, not too far from Santa Clarita, and right now we're not having it, but we try to hold it every year, someplace where we can have the bonfires, and it is celebrated like for 3 days, and you don't go to bed during that. You stay awake during that night, because so it's a very special day. It's a very special day for Latvians. I think also Estonians, if I'm not mistaken, and maybe Swedish celebrate that.
Well, Midsummer is an important holiday for most Europeans.
Right,
It's
right.
It's a harvest time, and there are, in England, there's bonfires for everything. You just drop a name somewhere and somebody has a bonfire because it's cold, it's rainy. You're gonna want a bonfire, but there's a lot of harvest celebrations that are broken down into different kinds of things, and so there, even in London, where you're really not that agrarian as they are in the outlying areas, they still recognize the Midsummer holidays as well, because the church is obviously intimately involved in these things with the blessing of this and the blessing of that.
It's a pagan holiday. I mean, yeah, it's.
Well, the Christians adopted a lot of the pagan traditions and rites because that's what the people knew. And if you change a famous pagan well, you don't block it up. You recognize it and you go, well, this is now Mary's well. This is the holy well. So so there was a lot of the transfer of pagan rituals and rites into the Christian era. People still did pretty strictly pagan things or changed it to something else. May Day festivals. That pole is a fertility symbol. Right? And we're all dancing around it. We all know what that means.
Okay, we won't.
There you go.
We won't go into discussion on it.
Janet, what about your characters? Are they celebrating Midsummer?
Oh, absolutely. They absolutely were. They celebrate. They celebrated all summer long. There were several times. That was Whitsuntide, which was more like June, and then one of the things they did in the Tudor era later was they moved the harvest. The harvest, they used to celebrate it before the harvest on like August 1st, and then they decided that they would move it to celebrate it after. And I'm not really sure why, but after the celebration would be with a big meal, and obviously the meal was going to be a lot bigger after the harvest than it was before. I think it also might have felt like hubris to celebrate it before then, but that was the switch over for one of those.
It looks like we don't have any more questions in the chat, which is great because it is just about 6 o'clock. So we've just come in under the clock there. If you would like to know more about History Talks, we do have a WordPress. It's historicalspeakers.wordpress.com if you were interested. We also have a Facebook group if anyone is looking for us online on Facebook. It is History Talks ! And I would just like to thank the library once again for hosting us tonight. It was lovely for
Thank you,
us to be here.
Pasadena.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Pasadena.
library. Enjoy it.
I want to thank you all, Jeri, Erin, Janet, and Diana, for the wonderful presentation today about holidays through time. We all learned so much, so thank you very, very much for presenting this for the Pasadena Public Library, and we wish you all a very happy holidays.
You too.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much for coming. Happy holidays.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming, everybody.
Bye. Bye. Thank you.
All right, stay